Joining me now is House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. I'm so grateful you're here. I know you just returned from Munich, and it was a very busy trip, which I'm very excited to talk to you about. And I just wanted to start, Speaker Pelosi, with Alexei Navalny. I think we all have spent the last couple of days just thinking about him and the role he played. And I was very struck by the fact that it took Trump 3 days to finally make any comment about his death, even though many people did. But when he did, he compared Navalny's death to his own legal problems and didn't in any way condemn Vladimir Putin, which doesn't seem hard for most people to do. What did you think when you read that?
Well, first, let me wish everyone a happy President's Day. I have these cherries here in this pin reminding us that George Washington said, "I cannot tell a lie. I chop down the cherry tree." Now you're talking about a president, a former president, who cannot tell the truth. And Navalny assassination, as it was such a tragic thing. I was in Munich when the news came out. I heard his widow, Julia, speak to the gathered assemblage there to great reception. She could not at first face the fact that he might be dead and thought maybe Putin might be, as usual, lying. But the fact is, then the next day they said, we have confirmed that he has been assassinated by Vladimir Putin, putting it right at his doorstep. So then his pal in the United States, Donald Trump, and you wonder, what does Putin have on Donald Trump that he always has to be beholden to him, his buddy in vileness. And I don't know if you're going to show the American people the statement that he made, but it's beneath the dignity of a human being. It is so horrible, you think, no, somebody must have made this up. Not even Donald Trump could go this far. As I've said, he's in a limbo competition with himself. How far can he go? Well, now he's gone below sea level, below ground level. And this statement should disqualify him from running for anything, much less president of the United States.
I think
to hear her comments... So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think so many people agree with you, and I summarized it. We just showed it so people could see it, but because it was so far off, as you just said, from what should be stated. Yeah. I did want to ask you, I mean, you seem to have this really touching moment with her after she gave that speech you just referenced. It was caught on video. What did you convey to her?
Of course, I conveyed condolences and the hope that she was correct, that he had not died, but we all were suspicious because when she made her speech, she was enormously received, and she came down from the stage to thank me for some things, and of course, I extended my sadness for what had happened, but subscribing to her position at the time that that he might still be alive. But he was assassinated, and now they won't let the family have the body to bury or to examine or anything. This is vileness. To your first point here, Putin is probably the richest person in the world. Probably the richest person in the world. Forget all these ratings that people have. The richest person in the world. He's also the most, well, not the most evil, stiff competition for that honor, but nonetheless among the top 3 or 4 most evil people in the world. What does he have on Donald Trump that he have to constantly be catering to Putin? Telling Putin, go into these countries, NATO countries. NATO was there to stop Russia, to keep Russia out. They have been successful for nearly 75 years. We will celebrate that security success. And then we have, what's his name? I usually have him nameless, saying he doesn't support NATO and encouraging Russia to invade NATO countries.
He who shall not be named. I know Voldemort well, so there's another guy kind of like him. What do you think? We're all wondering this question, Speaker Pelosi. What do you think Putin has on him? I mean, it sure seems like something, as you've said a few times, given that he refuses to criticize him, that he seems to be a fanboy of him. Are you worried at all?
Well, during the Mueller...
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, first of all, First of all, we must be sure that he does not step 1 foot into the White House, not as president or not as anything. He has brought disgrace to the White House, to these presidents. I talked about George Washington. It's also President's Week for Abraham Lincoln. When Abraham Lincoln died, it was embroidered in his coat that night at that theater, "One country, one destiny." And he gave his life to unify our country. And now we have someone who had the honor of serving in the White House, didn't consider it an honor, didn't consider his oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution. And on this week, speaking out the way he did about Navalny shows you that he is a person without values. He looks like he's going to be a person without dollars either, but the values are what concern us.
Yes, the dollars.
So I don't know what he has on him, but I think it's probably financial. I think it's probably financial, either something financial he has on or something on the come.
Yeah, well, let me ask you about that.
As you
just referenced, I mean, he owes a tremendous $500 million because of these civil lawsuits that were argued against him, and he lost.
Yeah.
You know, I asked John Bolton, who I'm certain you don't have a lot of in common with, about whether he's concerned that a foreign leader, a dictator, an authoritarian country could have something, could be trying to target Trump. And he said they probably already are. Do you agree with that? Do you share that concern?
Well, I've always been concerned that the first trip he made as president of the United States out of the country was to Saudi Arabia. And you see now that his family is receiving investments in the billions from Saudi Arabia. But really, people care about what it means to them and their lives. And this, what also happened over the weekend is what happened in Alabama. Personhood in the Supreme Court, in vitro fertilization outlawed. I have a letter from my constituent who said, as a father, I would not be a father without in vitro fertilization. You have to fight this. You have to fight this. In Mississippi, we won 2 times when they tried a personhood. Mississippi. So make no mistake, don't be misled by his fraudulent, written up in the New York Times as a legitimate, what's happened to them, a legitimate proposal of a time limit on terminating a pregnancy. No ban on abortion. But also, let's talk about women just exercising their right or access to contraception or to in vitro fertilization. This is a very dangerous person when it comes to your family at your kitchen table. This is only one example of how dangerous he is.
It's so important, that Alabama case you raised. I mean, so many women are mothers because of IVF, and so many are hoping to be mothers. And he said he wants a 16-week ban because he likes a round number. So let's be horrified by that, too.